5 car manufacturers that won't survive the next 2 years. Many manufacturers are making cars that are affordable, fun, full of tech, and perform well. There's a few manufacturers that just seem to miss the mark. Sales are dropping, and you wonder how they even survive this long. I'm going to share a list of 5 of those devastatingly brutal car manufacturers that we likely won't see around in the next year to 2 years because they just don't sell anything that people are looking for. Let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
From my experience, there's 3 major factors which define the future success of a lot of these cars. Number 1, what is the year-over-year sales? Is it going down? Is it rising? Number 2, do they create something that's intriguing and interesting, and what does their future look like? Any big outlooks, any great new models coming out? And number 3, what is their reputation? Have they been notoriously known for problematic vehicles that nobody's buying because of massive amounts of recalls and real trouble? Yeah, it could be any one or all of the above. But let's break it down. The first car manufacturer that definitely won't stand a chance is Infiniti. I mean, let's be honest, we're watching year-over-year sales. Back in 2020, they were down about 79,500 units from the year before. As a matter of fact, they dropped about 32% on a year-over-year change. In 21, they were selling only about 58,500 and dropped another 26% year-over-year. 22, it was 46,600 units sold, down another 20%. And in 23, they sold a little peak at 64,700. There's a bit of a rebound at 39%. And in 24, there's an estimated 58,000 units sold, another further decline of 10% year over year. Now, there's 3 major reasons for this. Number 1, of course, we know Infiniti and the reputation. They've struggled with the problems, with CVT transmissions that they've shared with the Nissan products, and clearly a lot of people are starting to recognize the continuously variable transmission, or I call it the elastic band transmission, has been all kinds of the source of issues. $5, $6, $7, $8,000 repairs when they wear out, they burn up and catastrophically fail. And it's a very high prone issue with a high probability because of the Jatco transmission. The worst part is a lot of these products are actually sold over in Mitsubishi land, so they're sharing a lot of the basic platform. But Infiniti really just identifies as not having an identity, and I think that, in my opinion, is one of the biggest downfalls. Nobody really thinks about them. When you think a lot of these luxury brands, even if you like the Japanese brands, you're thinking Lexus, number 1. Number 2 would be likely Acura, which is also shrinking. And then you're thinking, well, what else is there? And then you start thinking of the German manufacturers. And a lot of people just sleep on Infiniti. Well, in many cases, it's because of the reliability issues with the Jatco and now the variable compression motors, which we've heard about. They're almost 500,000 units now recalled because of catastrophic bottom end engine failures due to these variable compression engines. They're turbocharged, direct injected, and they're seriously not built to last. Another problem is they really don't have a strong EV or hybrid technology future that they're really painting the picture, sharing with the buyers what they're actually planning. They're sort of trying a few things here and there. The Leaf was a bit of a hit and miss, and of course the Aria is another model, but there really doesn't seem to be a big effort and push to go down the path of the hybrids or the plug-in hybrids, which a lot of other OEMs are doing now and making that decision, like Honda saying, you know what, we're not going EV, we're going to back up to tracks and we're going to actually go more with the hybrid tech, something more realistic and something more that consumers are looking for. Another problem is they're just outdated. They just don't compete with the likes of the innovations coming out of the Mercedes brand, BMW brand, even Audi, which isn't necessarily top pop, but they just don't have the innovation. They lack the style, they definitely lack the performance, and moreover, they lack the reliability that even some of their competition from Germany are providing. With the combination, depending on the drivetrains and the models, with CVTs or variable compression engine, it's no wonder some of their models are going away. Sure, while they have the beautiful QX80, and I love that model, large and in charge, new twin-turbo V6, I love that engine, I love that vehicle. But you can't survive on one big overloaded, overbloated type of SUV. It just won't sell and it's not going to make it. In my own personal opinion, Infiniti, Nissan, part of the same company, struggling, of course, collaborating with Mitsubishi, another dying horse. It just scratches my head and I wonder, how could they even survive when we're seeing these year over year declines with nothing in the future that really tells me come and get? Now, of course, they're also saying, well, they're trying to turn this ship around and do something unique. Yes, the latest models of some of their vehicles, they've decided to ditch the CVT and put in a torque converter auto, but they still continue with the very compression engines. And it's a sign, even in vehicles like the Murano, that it's too little too late. Something major has to happen, something major has to change. But unless it does, the next 2 years, with lacking in innovation and the strong competition, means likely, in my personal opinion, Infiniti is gone by the dodo bird. The next one I truly believe is going to be gone in the next couple of years. I don't even think they're going to last that long. It's a subsidiary, of course, to Stellantis, and it's Chrysler. What does Chrysler make these days? Let's be honest. A boring, ho-hum vanilla yogurt looks like a milk carton on wheels, and it's basically a minivan, the Chrysler minivan. Ever since the Chrysler 300 went away, all they really have now is a Pacifica that nobody's really looking for. Sure, you go down to the airport, you take a flight, get off the plane, take a rental car, and you'll probably see a whole fleet of hundreds of those in the rental fleet because they're easy, they're practical, and they're cheap. So when people are glancing off the curbs and people are getting bumped into on the strip in Las Vegas after they rent one of these minivans, the rental companies don't get too wired up about it. These literally are dying a hard death. And unfortunately, Dodge isn't doing much better, but Chrysler is definitely leading the pack. In 2020, they sold 110,000 units, and they were actually down about 13% in sales from the year before. Then in 2021, they sold 115,000 units, a slight uptick. They sold another 4%, and largely because of heavy incentives. Then in 2022, they sold about 112,000 units, down another 3%, and they nullified the year before. In 23, they sold 134,000. And of course, went up the uptick at 19%. And a lot of that just came on the backs of the fact that residual from the end of 22 when the whole market peaked. Of course, after that and rolling into 24, they sold 124,000 units, which dropped yet another 7%. As you can see, they're sort of a zigzag up and down yo-yo affair, and nobody's really buying them. And with one minivan on the market, with strong competitors like the Honda Odyssey or Toyota Sienna, it begs the question why anybody even buys these. There are 3 reasons why I believe these vehicles are going away in the next couple of years. We're watching the trends up and down, up and down. But this transformation to EVs and hybrid technology, and of course the CEO getting punted from Stellantis, means this whole new retraction, bringing back V8 engines, while the entire industry is transitioning to hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and a little bit of electrification. This vehicle gets sort of caught up in the mix, and it doesn't seem like something a lot of people are interested in. And of course, declining sales, on top of the fact that that's literally the only vehicle in the Chrysler brand that's sort of holding it on by a thread, means likely you're not going to see this in a couple of years. A second reason is they essentially cannibalized their entire brand. Stellantis has so much overlap between Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, Jeep. There's so many products that are almost the same thing with a different grille and a different badge, and the quality is the same, the recalls are similar, and honestly, it just lacks in ingenuity, it lacks the innovation, and it's just boring. Oh, who would want one of these vehicles? Certainly not I. Even if I wanted a minivan, which I don't, that's the furthest thing because, I mean, at the end of the day, life's too short to drive boring cars. And this is probably the furthest thing from an exciting driving experience. With one brand and one model under that brand, it means it's likely not around in another couple of years. And the third part to that, unfortunately, old man Chrysler is literally rolling in his grave, dreaming in nightmares and night terrors and night sweats over the whole idea of how he went from a luxury type brand way back many moons ago to selling one minivan that looks like a milk carton. Lucerne, ring a bell? I mean, these are absolutely horrific. The third one actually pains me because Jaguar is actually one of these brands. I've owned one and I've driven numerous and they all have such a charm.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
And it's unfortunate, but let's be honest. I think we'd be all foolish if we assume that we're going to see Jaguar for sale in the upcoming years. I see that literally one of the strongest brands to walk out that door. It's a sad state of affairs. When Tata Motors took it over, they had some ideas at first, but it didn't really come to fruition. And I keep getting these emails from the JLR group trying to pawn a lot of these vehicles off, whether it's some of their new I-Pace or a lot of their Jaguar Land Rover products, because they're constantly trying to build and enhance and enrich in their core fundamental buyers. But let's be honest, nobody's buying Jaguars these days. My F-Type R was absolutely amazing and it was a stunner. But nothing really that exciting has come out since. There was a nice facelift for the F-Pace, but unfortunately, they've essentially canceled the production of that. E-Pace, bye-bye as well. F-Type, gone. Any model worth driving in the Jaguar lineup went bye-bye. And unfortunately, one of the major issues was a big interruption as they transitioned from gas to EVs. They put all of their eggs in that one basket. They went totally one way that was odd and obscure and tried to rebrand. And of course, that rebrand backfired and ultimately turned a lot of would-be buyers off. And now it ultimately left the entire brand orphaned. They didn't know what to do. They even took a hiatus and said, you know what, nah, we're going to wait this one out. Maybe it was a matter of retooling. Maybe it was a matter of letting the dust settle until the EV market was caught back up again. But now, as we can see, a lot of parts, particularly in the United States, is we're seeing the sales in EVs are sort of cooling off. Lukewarm now, so to speak. I mean, while they were peaking for a while, Jaguar thought they were going to hit that ground running, but things just didn't really work out as planned. Now, with the trend downwards with EVs, and even more so with expensive premium EVs, and the fact that they're not tooled up and ready to sell any internal combustion engines anytime soon, it really begs a question: what's the future? As a matter of fact, I was at a JLR dealership recently, and they've pretty much pulled almost all the literature and everything off. As a matter of fact, the ownership have sort of split that out and said, you know what? Now you're just basically a Land Rover group, and Jaguar, well, let's just put that to sleep for a while. So it's a sad state because where they were and where they're at today is absolutely devastating. But when we look at sales in 2020, 102,000 units were sold. They were down 24% in that year from the year before. In 21, they sold 86,000, dropped another 16%. In 22, 61,000, dropped another 29%. In 23, they sold 33,000. That was a big hit. They dropped another 46%. And in 24, they only sold 27,000 units and dropped another 18%. Where was the bleeding going to end? Where was the bottom for this? I don't think there is a bottom, and we continually see them fall. The worst part is, because of the rebrand, because of all of this change, and because this hiatus that they speak of, 25 and 26 are absolutely damaging, and yet the numbers aren't necessarily chalked up yet. I can't even imagine what the sales numbers look like. It's got to be absolutely devastating. But as a result, there's three major reasons for this catastrophic failure and the fact that I don't personally believe Jaguar is going to be around in a couple of years. Number one is the EV transition and the interruption, which they sort of banked on it and it didn't really pan out. Their timing was off. They canceled their internal combustion vehicles and tried to transition and fast track the I-Pace. Nobody was interested. It didn't have the best range. It didn't have the best performance, didn't have the best tech, and it was sort of just ho-hum. Didn't really hit the mark. Number two is the brand reliability. I personally had good experience, but a lot of people talk about even a lot of their internal combustion engines, O2 sensors, fuel line issues, differential issues, electronic gremlins. I had some of those problems, special electronics and infotainment. And so the reliability sort of sticks, and people don't want that, especially as you're moving into something more complex and more expensive. They want to know that they're putting their money and parking it in a more secure location. The third part is, let's be honest, the competition is absolutely ferocious. Think about who they compete with. Mercedes, absolute innovators. Now, the reliability of Mercedes have been really falling, but they're innovating. They're creating new big screens, new tech. Safety is up there on the top, some of the best, most safe vehicles on the road. And so Mercedes is doing big things. Audi is sort of hanging on. They're trying to slowly innovate. They seem to be a little bit behind. BMW is leading the charge by a long shot. And so with some of the strong competition, it literally leaves Jaguar in the lurch. Who's buying Jags? I don't know. Everybody's over shopping the other brands from Germany. So who knows what the end looks like. But for me, I personally believe Jaguar is gone much sooner than later. And it devastates me because I loved my F-Type. Now, the fourth brand, it saddens me because I think it's a fun, cool, and have you ever heard of the 500 Abarth? I think those are fun, frivolous little cars. Now, I don't think this brand is necessarily going out of business entirely on the global scale because they're doing quite well in Europe. But certainly in the North American market, absolutely. Nobody's buying them. For Fiat 500e is basically the extent of what they're rocking now. There's a 500X, but let's be honest. There's just not a whole lot from the brand these days, and a lot of people just literally do not have the excitement for the brand. So Fiat is one of those manufacturers I truly believe is struggling right now in the North American market and may not be around for much longer. And before I get the ugly numbers out to you about Fiat, there's three major reasons why it's failing. They got a really tiny dealer network, and the networks are great. The dealers I've met are really top shelf, but the problem is a lot of people need to have more flexibility, and if there's only one dealer in a city of 1.5 million and you live in a smaller community, well, that isolates the vast majority of those buyers. So that's a big issue, is dealer support. Second is also a concern about reliability. Now, they aren't necessarily that poor in reliability, but everybody assumes, it's that type of vehicle. It's coming from Europe and it's probably not the most reliable. People get a little panicky and nervous, but I personally ask the question, why? People are driving by the billions Fords, Escapes, and EcoBoosts and EcoFarts and those kind of cars. And I wonder, why are people buying that junk? A lot of GMs with their 3-cylinder engines, junk. There's a lot of crap built in North America, a lot of crap built in Europe and all over the place. But yet, this one seems to be suffering the fate of a poor reputation of reliability. It's actually no worse than anything else on the market. As a matter of fact, probably better than some of them. But it's the reputation that hangs on. The third problem is, let's be honest, it's a bit of a mismatch for the industry. In North America, people look around. They love their big SUVs. They love their big pickup trucks. They love big fast cars, 5 Series cars, big full-size 3-row SUVs. That's what's selling. Not these small little diminutive sporty type cars, or these little econo boxes that you're finding like smart cars and minis and all of these little cars that are super practical in Europe because of the narrow roads, the short parking slots. Those make total sense. But here in North America, very few people have that concern, and therefore it just doesn't interest a lot of people. A lot of buyers in the US and Canada prefer to have something that's a little bigger, more substantial. They feel safe. When they're driving down the highway, they got semis and buses passing them and big SUVs and trucks. They don't want to be in a little car that weighs 1,700 pounds that's, 6 inches off the ground. A lot of people feel insecure, and it just doesn't really match with the North American buyer so much. And that's another big factor why they're not selling. But sales really have been on the decline, because back in 2020, they sold about 4,300 units. That's actually down 53% from the year before. In 2021, they sold 2,400 units in the US market. They were down yet another 44% year over year. Then in 22, in the peak, they actually only sold 915 units, and to the tune of a 62% loss or decline year over year in sales. Then in 2023, they sold 605 units and again lost another 34% year over year sales. And then in 24, they sold under 500, and they wondered where the bottom was, because they was actually down 20% year over year even further. Asking and begging the question, where is the bottom? When will you stop the bleeding? How do you put a little band-aid on an axe wound? It's absolutely devastating, the sales that have been going on. Now, a lot of it had to do with the dropping of the IC and the combustion vehicles and transitioning more to just electrification, as the entire brand by Stellantis has really been leaning on pushing on that technology. Well, that being said, the old outgoing CEO is gone, but things haven't changed all that much for Fiat. And while in Europe it might be doing fine, and a lot of early adopters continue adopting more and more of these EVs, the fact is, in the US and much of North America, they're just not as much on board, and that's a big reason these just don't sell. The fifth car manufacturer I truly believe might be gone in the next couple of years. They're lacking innovation. Research and development costs. They're not putting necessarily money into that. They also don't have an enthusiast backing. Back in the day, there was many cars that this brand would build that were really enthusiast driven. People got hot and heavy over it. They wanted these cars. They were willing to spend lots of money. But that has gone away because those models have gone away. Now they share the likes with drivetrains from Nissan, which we know already are essentially a flop. But let's be honest, Mitsubishi is one of these brands that is not selling worth a crapper. And on top of it, in 2020, they sold 87,000 units, down about 28%. Then in 21, they sold 102,000, They went up about 17%. In 22, they sold about 85,000 units, back down another 17% and offset that. 23, they sold 88,000, up about 4%. And then in 24, they sold about 78,000, down yet another 11%. So the overall trend year over year looks to be consistently in a downward spiral. And the fact that there's very little research, very little development, no models to get people overly excited about. And sure, while they have plug-in hybrid for some of this, the technology is just a little antiquated. I mean, I've looked around and I've seen lots of motivation and incentives to try to sell these products. I see lots of great lease and finance deals, and that's just about the only thing capturing buyers and pulling them into the door. Otherwise, nobody's buying Mitsubishis these days. There's so many better products for merely spend another 3 or 4 grand and you get a vehicle that feels like it's 4, 5, 10 times the more, more valuable, more solid, more substantial. In my opinion, Mitsubishi is just a brand that's struggling, hanging on by a thread, just like we're seeing with Nissan, Infiniti, and many of these other brands. I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. Please do drop a line, what you think about these brands. Maybe you've got some others that you truly believe are going away, or maybe should be going away in your own personal opinion. But right there, check out these 2 videos. They're going to give you a lot of insight about what's going on in the market. Be sure to check them out. Hope to see each and every one here real soon, everybody. We'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.